Geographic shows, of course, when they do the documentaries.
Yeah, they don't have any problem showing animals fucking. And the difference is another reification.
Layers.
Right? It's not just animals, it's these human animals. In other words, and if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Nobody's supposed to relate to the animals that we see on Wild Kingdom. You're not supposed to be watching the tiger chasing down the antelope and thinking, man, how about that's pretty tasty.
It would seem that reification errors and applications and assignments, the whole bit, is typically going to be found somewhere within the layers of reflection or projection. So if I'm reflecting, I'm like, I can't do porn on PBS because that's way too close to home. That's human. But I can watch this documentary of these animals fucking because I'm not a fucking zebra. That's what
I'm saying. It's like it's like the opposite of reification.
Right, exactly. So they're able, because of the reflective component and because they can't project themselves into and see themselves inside of, a zebra as they can a person. So this makes it, and the same things get pulled on for empathy cells. For example, every time you've seen those Sarah McLachlan commercials of kids in Africa, that's pulling on these empathetic straws, which aren't necessarily a bad thing to pull on sometimes, but same thing happening there, using reflection and projection techniques to invoke the kind of response through reification, it sounds like.
Well, there's this word, you ever heard it, prurient?
I don't think I have, but it sounds interesting.
It basically means invoking a hard-on. In other words, you look at some image and it makes you aroused, and that's the connection. That's the reification that makes human porn not acceptable on PBS, and it's just fine if it's animal porn.
Interesting.
Which is kind of outrageous if you think about it. But
yeah, no doubt.
Another one where they actually get away with that is like home birth movies.
Yeah.
And it's if you. Something similar was in the end of the movie Children of Men. When the meaning behind that baby. Have you seen that movie?
I have not.
Where nobody's been born for like 18 years. Like for some reason the humans just became infertile.
Wow.
And so there's empty schools and nobody's buying, walkers, and nobody's buying little kids' clothes, and it's like, I guess the humans are, and there's war everywhere as everybody competes for these last resources, and then a baby is born, and in the middle of a battle, the baby cries, and the whole battle stops. Nobody even thinks twice about hurting that baby, and after the whole movie, anybody can feel that, and you have children, so you know how exactly when they cry. You can hear that like nothing, like it's built in. And it turns out that kind of reification, similar to, did you ever see those cartoons where there's two guys on a boat, and they've been out on the boat for a while, and the one guy, they're both sitting there, right? They're dying of thirst or whatever, and this guy is thinking, you know what I'm talking about?
I get, yeah, exactly. Oh, so they're stranded out in the ocean, and the cartoon. Then all of a sudden, this is the first time the thought of cannibalism creeps in, right?
Yeah, he starts seeing maybe I can find it.
And then after this, I want to something I did not prep you on. I'm going to propose the greatest reification error, because we're going to be capping with about 15 minutes left or so.
What's that?
Well, I think that the greatest reification error of all time, period, and it is the symbol of Christ. And the reason I say that is because of the context previous to the time people proposed Christ, walked and died, and the time thereafter. In other words, Christ has been such a reification error historically that
let's take a quick imagery here. So you're saying Christ. I'm going to go back to his Egyptian roots and say it's Ra.
Well, so symbol of Christ or symbol of Ra. So effectively, the story of, almost you could say, right? The
Christ, the Son, was associated with the sun,
right?
And to me, I think that's the greatest reification here. The big bright ball in the sky, the one that drives all the life here on Earth, the one without which we'd all, freeze, is God. That's the big reification here. Now, do you know what Buckminster Fuller said about, and this is something that really opened my eyes. In fact, this might be the thing that opened my eyes. Do you know what "made in His image" means?
To me, it's always meant, and I might have sent this to you. I've made a sketch of it, but made in the image of the universe has always been my feeling of what it meant. In other words, like my brain operates like that consciousness. The vibrations is the space between. That's this. That gets to my lungs and my vitals. That's the planets in the orbit. So that's always been what it meant to me.
Well, this is a big deal because this starts out in some of our oldest stories, right? That God made people in His image, and some people, they take that to mean that God actually looks like us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, yeah, that's incorrect. But yeah, that's one of the ways people have interpreted it for sure. Most popular, probably.
What Buckminster Fuller says is that it's really about that giant connection between our minds and reality.
Yeah.
Because our mind is different than anything else that we ever experience.
And our mind is what, so this one can go, so the mind is what creates the reality in front of us at all times. Without having the mind to interpret the reality in front of us at all times, to have the thought process coming in and clicking, and the reality of the situation being that the change of our mind will change the reality. So in other words, if me and you, Tom, this is a great example. We actually got into it early on when we crossed paths here on the Facebook interwebs. And a shift in the mindset of how I perceived what you were trying to communicate to me changed the entire universe of that relationship. And that's, of course, so of course, I completely agree with Buckminster Fuller here. I've always thought, and I think I sent, not always, but for some time, and I think I sent that to you. I think it's pretty clear in a sense of if I were to say made in His image, my heart would behave similarly to a sun that's pumping out vitals, and then that's also giving blood and fluids outward, but then it's also receiving signals from my brain and sending life to my brain at the same time through this space in between, which is, vibrations, which vibrations, of course, is, word or anything. So
we also have nutrition.
Yeah.
In addition to perceptions. We also have information. I guess that's perception.
And this is where, I guess, when I say reification air being Christ being the greatest reification air of all time, or Ra, or the story of, what I mean by that, and on top of the symbol of the sun and everything, I mean just the debate on down to practical terms. The biggest debate between the faithful communities have been if He were a Messiah or not, based on His application of fulfillment of prophecy. And so we've had millennia of debate about if He fulfilled prophecy, as opposed to, if the messages this human being was trying to convey could be effective, regardless of if He were the fulfillment of prophecy or not. See, so that fallacy, that reification there, removes our ability.
But there's the reification, the big deal, talking about Christ is, does He fulfill the prophecy? Are His teachings consistent with the law? That's that same sort of metaphoric connection. where when people start discussing it, maybe they're trying to bring in an extra thing sort of under the radar with an extra symbolic connection that you're not really talking about.
Right. As opposed to trying to figure out, because ultimately, and Buckminster Fuller touched on this as well as anyone, the objective of any human being should be, working in a way to try to make things, generally speaking, better within the universe and the climate and the world and everything. And so if that's just speaking on the most fundamental level of a human, not all the different responsibilities we have to our families, but just as a human, we should want to make things better for other humans, right? And so if that's the perception you take, then you don't care necessarily what people assign, a story of someone like Christ as, or someone like Gandhi as. You just try to procure the parts of their life that were beneficial. But we get torn away from that with things like reification there, right? Is that am I hearing that part of it correctly?
The reification is built into everything in terms of how we cope with the world. And so the only issue for me is that if we can make a clear distinction in our heads between what's in our heads and what we're using our heads to talk about, between our words and the words that we're talking about, we sort of see that big reification between our mind and the universe, or our mind and God's mind, if you want to talk in those terms. But really, we have the exact same thing going on between any two people or any collection of people. There's always that flow of information and flow of material. And when we don't talk properly about it, it's almost like we're missing. The flow goes to the wrong spot, or the flow breaks down, and that's what creates stresses that make things distort and fail.
Yeah.
So the thing that my jumping off point, and I think we covered it pretty well, is that these flag arguments often stall when it comes down to what's the symbol really mean and who's in charge of what that symbol means. And, why does it mean that? When we mean something by a symbol, it's a personal choice. It's not something that anybody can take ownership of. Nobody can tell you what you mean. Nobody can stop you from meaning something. And discussions that don't respect that, that's where the blockage often comes. Draw a dead Jesus. All right, let's see. I'll draw a dead Jesus real quick.
I didn't realize there was still. Oh, awesome! That's hilarious. This is hilarious. Oh man, I didn't see that the thread was still going. That's great. But no.
Why don't you read some of those and answer some of those, and I'll draw a dead Jesus here real quick. Let's see here. That
doesn't mean we can't talk about it. Substance over symbolism. Yeah, that's a great point. So, rule of thumb I have is before we can even discuss if something should be not legal, tell me, can it be changed by the government without anything being issued? So, for example, if I can add 10 stars to that fucking flag, then someone who buys it can burn it. So if I'm the government and I can buy 10 states, add 10 stars, then a person who buys it can burn it. So substance over symbolism. Holy shit. That's a great fucking drawing. Well, tens of million star for it. I use it when you see. It's the loser's flag, Tennessee battle flag, I think. Yeah, you were right, by the way. It started being flown in 1961 in South Carolina, talking about the Confederate flag, to commemorate the centennial, and then continued doing so until it went down in around 2015, 2016. Tried to educate my mom on why it became popular again. She was doing Jim Crow era, that too, yeah. Boom. Dan's, you don't get to say what I mean by my words. Man, if people could just wrap their minds around that,